Lebanon. His tireless work in rebuilding and revitalizing the town of Lebanon's fire and EMS departments. Fire Chief Meehan work has benefited the citizens of Lebanon and the citizens of adjoining communities that participate in mutual aid. We extend our appreciation and best wishes to Fire Chief Meehan, and we order that this official expression of sentiment be set forthwith on behalf of the 127th Maine Legislature and the people of the great state of Maine. It's signed by Senate President Michael Thibodeau and House Speaker Mark Keys. So, we're going to take this. In addition, I got one thing else I want to present. So realizing last week's weather we had a little bit of snow, and this is appropriate. And what this is, the current president of the Maine Senate, his name is Mike Thibodeau. He's an entrepreneur type, and he started a company called Waldo Snow Shovel Company. They manufactures snow shovels here in Maine. And he and I made a call together down to Aubuchon's in Massachusetts last fall, which I accepted to Aubuchon. But, long story short, he was at one time a volunteer fireman. And he wants every fire chief in Maine to have one of his fire chief shovels. So, this is going to the chief as well. Thank you, Senator. Here,
Thank you. I'm Representative Karen Garrett, District 20, all of the town of Lebanon. It's a pleasure to be here today. I think I'll be presenting at least 2, if not 3, sentiments along with Senator Collins. I'd like to ask that members of Tom Potter's family join me up here. In memoriam, whereas the 127th legislature has learned with deep regret of the death of C. Thomas Potter of Lebanon, a veteran of the United States Navy. Mr. Potter was born and raised in the Boston, Massachusetts area. For 4 years, he was in the communications field with the United States Navy. For 21 months, he took part in monitoring the Russian Black Sea Fleet. Following his time with the Navy, he attended and graduated from Tufts University, which I understand is a family tradition, where he met his beloved wife, Barbara. In 1958, they moved to our dear town of Lebanon, where Mr. Potter became a dairy farmer and opened Potter's Place camper with his brothers. His civic involvement was extensive and included membership in the Springfield Masonic Lodge, of which he was a 57-year member. Service in the late 1980s as Lebanon's interim road commissioner, participation on Lebanon's budget committee and planning board, and 2 terms as a Lebanon selectman. Mr. Potter will be long remembered and sadly missed by his family, friends, and colleagues. Therefore, be it resolved that we, the members of the Senate and House of Representatives, pause in a moment of understanding and prayer to inscribe this token of sympathy and condolence to all who share this great loss, and respectfully request that when the legislature adjourns on this date, it do so in honor and lasting tribute to the deceased.
stairs and sleep on rollers. Anybody up to it or fit disabled? Thank you.
Senator Thomas, I would like to ask members of Butch Welch's family to come up and present this memorial.
This is the memorial. Whereas the 127th Maine Legislature has learned with deep regret of the death of Lebanon Maine of Lebanon. Mr. Welch was born in Stafford and graduated from Stafford High School in 1958. For nearly 20 years, he was employed by the First National Store and eventually managing the Stafford store. He later worked for Curry's Brothers as an on-the-road grocery salesman, and his brother Wally started a new dealer for builders. He built nearly 200 homes and also founded the initial building Palace. The business grew and became well-respected in Lebanon. Mr. Welch was a member of the Jacksonville Athletic Club, number 190, serving as master in 1981. George Myers, Pioneer Club, Renegade, and the Scottish Rights Body of the Valley of Paul, the Royal Order of Justice, number 107. The Riverside Range, number 475, the youth chapter, 14 of the Order of the Star, and second member of the Order of the Mr. Welch also served in the Baltimore family, wife member of the Springville Investment Association. Mr. Welch was long remembered and sadly missed by his family, friends, and colleagues. Therefore, be it resolved, we, the members of the Senate House of Representatives, pause for a moment of understanding and prayer to describe this token of sympathy and condolence to all who share this great loss, and respectfully request that when the legislature adjourns this date, that's all in the honor of national tribute for the deceased. Signed by the Senate President Michael Thibodeau, the Speaker of the House, Mark Hughes.
They gave so much to this community. They built my childhood home. They built the Lebanon Fire Station. They volunteered their time. And I miss them well. Thank you. Is there anyone here from the Norms to Roy camp? No more.
Come forward. Back forward.
And thank you for your patience. This is our last legislative sentiment. Norm is a dear friend, teacher, neighbor, and we're honoring Senator Collins and I also to honor Norm with this legislative sentiment today. Be it known to all that we, the members of the Senate and the House, join in recognizing Norm Soroy's of Lebanon, a graphic arts instructor at Sanford Regional Technical Center, on his being named the winner of the January 2016 Golden Apple Award. The Golden Apple Award is given by radio station in Portland to recognize educators dedicated to the intellectual and emotional growth of many children and young adults. We extend to Mr. Soroy our congratulations and best wishes, and be accorded that this official expression of sentiment be sent forthwith on behalf of the 127th Legislature and the people of the great state of Maine. Congratulations, Norm.
Thank you. So my name's Richard Nass. I'm going to try to moderate today. The rules basically are as is takes place at most town meetings throughout Maine. And unless there's objections today, we're going to run this meeting according to the rules set out with the Maine moderator. This is a very simple set of parliamentary procedure. So there's not going to be, great parliamentary maneuvers here going on today, because essentially we're not going to vote on anything today. The purpose of this meeting is to have a public hearing on the articles which you're going to vote on May 10th in referendum, secret ballot. Okay? So what we need to be concerned about today is that, A, we give everybody a chance to talk if they want. What does talk consist of? Talk consists of asking questions. The selectmen are here, along with one of the town attorneys, Christine Patterson, right? That's Mary Costigan, not even close. Sorry, Mary. The budget committee is here. They are here to answer questions. The other thing that's going to be available today is to advocate. If you want to advocate for or against a particular article, that means if you'd like to make an argument to vote for or against one of the articles, that's also available today. We encourage you to do that. Now, having said that, once an argument has been made once or twice, probably doesn't do you any good to say the same thing 3 times. We've got a lot of articles to go through, so we need to move on. We're going to start with some ordinances, proposed ordinances today. I am not, unless somebody wants me to, I'm not going to read the ordinance, but we'll open the floor for discussion. In other words, questions. Yes, sir.
So you've gotten away from, I believe, your guide for meetings was supposed to actually elect a moderator. I have no opposition, and as a matter of fact, I will make a motion to nominate you as moderator, but we, the people, are supposed to elect the moderator, and it's not supposed to be appointed.
That's probably a good point to be made. However, this is really just a public hearing on all of the articles that you're going to vote on by referendum on May 12th. I'm happy to have your support, Mr. Moderator.
We said you're using those rules,
Yeah.
and we'll simply state that.
Well, the rules are more extensive. The rules get into all kinds of voting processes, and essentially the rules are set up to affect a result, basically. We're not going to have any results today except discussion. Okay, questions and answers, advocacy. Okay, so if the will of the group, you want to elect a moderator, I don't see the purpose of it, but I'm happy to stand for election if that's what you want. I just don't see that it really pertains to that.
I'll second his motion.
To elect a moderator. Okay. So is there a motion for moderator? This is kind of self-serving at this point. It's been moved and seconded that Richard Nass, that's me, be elected moderator.
Yes, sir. Thank
Are there any other nominations for moderator? Seeing none. We have one choice. All those in favor of Richard Nass being the moderator of this meeting, please raise your hand. Thank you. Hands down those opposed. Okay, this is a good start. Elected myself moderator. That historical record. Thank you. Okay, so again, discussion, ask questions, and advocate. So the first item of business is referendum 1. This is one of the ordinances. Shall an ordinance entitled Board of Appeals ordinance to the town of Lebanon be enacted? The selectmen's recommendation is 3 yes, 0 no, and 0 abstentions. Are there any questions or comments on the proposed Board of Appeals ordinance for the town of Lebanon, Maine? Yes, ma'am. You could just identify yourself.
My name is Deborah Wilson. I'm on the Lebanon Maine Truth Seekers page. I would like to know who wrote the Board of Appeals article, who is responsible for the writing of it, was it edited, who edited it, and whose input is in that article.
Okay, question. Can anybody answer who wrote the ordinance?
I took the lead on that, on the appeals board. It was passed through the town clerk, and we worked on it a little bit together, and then we also passed it to Mary as well for legal counsel.
Can you just add it?
Another question, yes. I want you to talk to me.
I'm
So
sorry.
you're asking questions today.
I far as Steve's.
You can ask the question, but you're looking at me.
Okay. If he had any other input when writing this, or where he got the ideas for the rules for the base for this article.
Okay, good question. Can anyone answer that?
Yeah, I can look at several of the towns, what they had out there, and as well, again, for the legal counsel. Who represents many towns from the state.
Can I do that?
Let's see if there's other questions first. Anybody else have any other questions on this ordinance relative to the Board of Appeals? See none. Further question, yes.
So my final part of that question, Beck, is that did you have any input from the Board of Appeals members? Did you open that for public discussion from the town on what they would like to see? So this is completely cut and paste from other towns outside of Lebanon.
This is actually, again, being edited by the town attorney.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions?
There's also a state statute about Board of Appeals, and this follows very closely with the state statute.
Very closely or exactly the state statute?
The statute is shorter, this is longer.
So does anybody here have the benefit?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Ask me a question.
Did anybody here have the benefit of reading this prior to us voting on it? We
Okay,
didn't
the
have
question
benefit.
is, I think this document has been out, it should have been available for people to read. I guess that's your question, right? Anybody care to express anything about whether they had an opportunity to read this?
I don't think that the community had an opportunity to realize that the voting date had been moved from the first Tuesday of June to the first Tuesday of May. And there's a lot of surprise information that has come to surface recently that makes a lot of people uncomfortable.
Okay. Yes, I'm sorry. Good point. Let's, just so, since we don't have a mic, if you're gonna have to talk or ask a question or make a comment, you need to stand up, okay? I think the room is small enough so we can hear each other if you're belted out a little bit, but, okay, additional comments or questions on referendum item number 1? Yes, ma'am.
Why was this necessary?
Okay, good question. Why was it necessary? Can anybody answer the question?
Who is that?
This, okay.
We say what it was.
Yes. Let's try to establish a pattern here. Stand up, ask your question, identify yourself, or identify yourself and ask your question. So, yes, ma'am.
I'm Melanie Fulcher. Why was it necessary to do this?
Thank you.
I can answer that. So the town currently has a Board of Appeals, but that Board of Appeals operates without any rules. And state statute says that the town establishes what jurisdiction the board has. In other words, what types of appeals can go to the board. And right now that board, there's no rules. There's no rules about how many members are on the board, how many terms they serve, what types of appeals they hear. Another really important thing to have is what's the standard of review, meaning when a board hears an appeal, is it a brand new hearing, or are they just reviewing a decision on the record below? So there's a lot of things that are really important that need to be in an ordinance that you currently don't have. So if someone was to be unhappy with a decision of the board, to go to court, the court would not know what to do because you have no guidance as to what your appeals board of appeals is made up of and what they have jurisdiction to do.
Additional questions on referendum item number 1? Yes.
I don't mean to be
Why don't you
ignorant.
identify yourself?
My name is Derek Boyer. I am a Lebanon resident. I'm a little confused. I'm sorry because I'm familiar with the 3 selectmen sitting at the selectmen's table, and I'm just curious as to who the young lady is.
I was introduced as the town attorney, Mary Costigan.
Okay, well, pleasure to meet you. I'm just familiar with your face. Thank you.
Yes.
Brenda Cole, I'm also a resident. Just curious, if someone wanted to read this ordinance, where would it be available?
Question about where is the ordinance available, other than being handed out today?
It's been available right at the town office, as soon as absentee ballots have been out.
It's also on the website.
Additional questions? Yes.
Well, it was in reference to this woman's question over here at the table. I did go to the town office yesterday and filled out a Freedom of Information Act request. I was given information, or darn near most of it, within the same business day. And I was given the information that you just asked about, the At first, it was questioned whether or not it was readily available yesterday, but when I expressed my wanting to read it prior to today, it was in fact made available for me with great effort from at least one person at the town office. So I do have one copy of that. So it was made available to me after filling out the proper request form.
Additional questions or comments on referendum item number 1, Board of Appeals? Yes, sir.
Chip Harlow, just more of a general question on ordinances. Is there a process in place on developing new ordinances? For example, some places may develop a draft, put it out for public input for 30 days, so you can get some feedback from different stakeholders, maybe make some changes, and then have a final that's out there for review. Is there any procedure that the town has for doing that?
Question. Anyone answer the question on procedure for ordinance? Additional comments or questions on? Yes, ma'am.
Deborah Wilson again. All right, before we get into voting on ordinances.
We're not voting today.
No.
You're
I
voting
know
on
we're
May
voting
10th.
on May 10th.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying. Before we get into voting on ordinances, I mean, I feel like we're putting the cart before the horse, and I don't know or understand, and I'd like an explanation why first we don't have rules on putting in ordinances before we start just relying on one single person to cut and paste ordinances from several different counties and put it in front of us to vote on.
I think that was a question. Is anybody prepared to comment on that? None? Okay. Yes, ma'am, is that? Additional comments on number 1, item 1, right?
Well, what you just said, so I lost my train of thought. This is unbelievable. What did you just ask?
I asked why we don't start from the
The
beginning.
ordinance. Okay, yeah. When I went to the town office yesterday, I was told by, I believe our town clerk, she's new. First of all, I asked for a current ordinance and regulation book for the town of Lebanon. In years past, I have been able to go into the town office, ask for the book. The first time I asked, I remember very well, because it was a little over 10 years ago, and actually it was Laura Bragg, who said to me, well, you know, that costs $20. And I said, and I have the $20. And so she reached under the counter and brought me the book, and I handed the $20 and got my receipt. Well, about a year or so ago, I went to the town office again to get a copy of the ordinance and regulation book, which my understanding is to be readily available to any person, whether you are a Lebanon resident or not. Should you be interested in purchasing property, taking on a contractor job, that needs to be available during regular business hours. It was not available. I had to wait 2 business days, I believe, before it could be available. When I went yesterday, that was one of the things that I was not able to get yesterday, was a current regulation book. Because the town clerk is new, she was not the clerk at the time all these ordinances were written and the information was compiled, and before she should be forced to sign her name on something, she needs to go over it and make sure, in fact, everything there is what it is supposed to be. So that being said, what she said to me when I asked her about who is allowed to pass new ordinances, she very adamantly and knowledgeably told me that the only way a new ordinance can be passed is if the people vote on the ordinance, period. So you need to take a look at what's on the ballot to be voted on. Bottom line, what is the importance of it? If it is not that important and it's not pressing, then maybe everybody should just take a minute and have all the time they want to go over it because there's another vote in 6 months. But what she said was the only people who can make new ordinances are the people. It has to be presented on a ballot and you have to vote on it. That being said, within the last few weeks, I have been into a local business here, and the woman shared with me something that was given to her by the town, okay? Not specifically
going to be on
by the town, yes. It is entitled.
Hold it. Are you going to be talking about the Board of
Yes,
Appeals ordinance?
specifically to the ordinance question.
No, about the Board of Appeals ordinance. Are you going to be addressing that because you're beginning?
Her question was,
No,
under what authority can a new ordinance be passed?
or your statement. what are you gonna be talking about? The Board of Appeals ordinance or something else?
Her question
No,
was,
no. What are you gonna be talking about? Not her question.
I'm answering her question, I'm sorry, that's what I was doing.
No.
I have a next outdoor festival ordinance that was made by
The item before us.
somebody, it's not signed, it's not dated, and it was sent to this business as an ordinance that was never voted on and has never been seen by
The
anyone.
item before us is
That's all I have
the Board
to
of
say. I'm
Appeals
sorry,
ordinance.
sir.
That's what we're talking about, okay?
Trying to answer the lady's question up front.
Listen, if you're not happy with these ordinances, on May 10th, you can vote against them.
Amen to
All
that.
right, so if that's what you want to advocate for, that's a simple statement to make. Okay?
Yes, sir, thank you.
Not going to go all over the ballpark here. Okay, other comments or questions about the Board of Appeals ordinance? Okay. Thank you. Item 2, referendum item 2. Develop ordinance entitled Maine Uniform Building and Energy Code Administrative Ordinance for the town of Lebanon, Maine, be enacted. Selectmen recommend 3, no no's and no abstentions. Are there questions or comments on referendum item number 2? Uniform Building and Energy Code. Yes, ma'am.
Once again, I would like to ask, who is responsible, whose input is included in this ordinance? Who wrote this?
Okay, the question is who wrote the ordinance?
And I'm sorry if Deborah Wilson gets
All
this
right,
stuff.
thank you. Anybody want to choose to answer this? Okay, I guess we have none. Other questions or comments? Yes, sir.
Chip Harlow, I had emailed the selectmen and the code enforcement officer twice about this ordinance. They obviously didn't feel that they needed to respond to a resident. So I reached out to the state of Maine for Richard McCarthy, who is in charge of code enforcement for the entire state of Maine. I asked him my questions, and indeed I was correct. There were some errors in this ordinance. The primary error is that the ordinance as currently written means that there are no permits required. So that's kind of a big deal. Let me explain why I say that and why the law, and I have supporting documentation here if anybody wants to see it after the meeting. The current ordinance says that permits are required per MUBEC. MUBEC is the Maine Uniform Building and Energy Code. If you go to MUBEC itself, you actually have to go to the IRC, which is the International Residential Code, and in that, the code does indeed say that you need permits. But, this is key, when Maine adopted that IRC as the residential code, in the adoption, they added a couple of lines. Basically a statement at the end of the sentence that said it requires permits. And it says, as per the municipality. So they put it back on the municipality whether or not permits are required. And they wanted to leave that, so basically they wanted to allow individual municipalities to determine whether you needed a permit to do what, rather than leaving it to the international, to the IRC. So, if I read the ordinance, it says per MUBEC. If I go to MUBEC, it says per the municipality. If I go to the municipality, it says per MUBEC. As you can see we got a circular reference. So that means nothing's required. That's the first key. I asked them this a month ago. Nobody bothered to respond. Why? I don't know. Maybe it was because the last election, I asked why were we amending a building code that doesn't exist, which was our own original one, and they didn't like that one. But anyways, next part, talking to Mr. McCarthy at the state, he wondered why our fees are so high. So if I do a new construction home for a 2,000 square foot home, not very big, that's what the building permit is, $800. When normally in towns, in the state, is $25 to $50.
Wow.
Kind of a big difference. So again, I don't know where they, as it's currently written. He actually said that normally there's a separate line item that says what new construction building permits are for. But the way it's currently written, it is not delineated. So those are just a couple of the errors that were found in this code that actually could have been addressed before this meeting if somebody chose to respond to a resident's question.
Thank you. Are there questions or comments on referendum item 2? Yes, Chris.
Chris Gilpatrick. I just have a question because somewhere I read in this ordinance that has something to do with third-party inspectors. And I was wondering what the deal was with that. I'd just like you to answer that question.
So the question is, are third-party inspectors part of this ordinance? Is that the question?
Yes, because I read somewhere where a commercial building can be inspected with a third-party inspector. However, a residential building cannot be inspected by a third-party inspector. Is that true?
Anybody answer the question?
Yes, but it's 1 and 2 family residential is covered by the International Residential Code, and the International Building Code is any higher residential number or commercial. And those in the building code are inspected by third party. The 1 and 2 family are inspected by the code officer under the ordinance.
Okay, so let me get this straight, okay? I'm building a house. I've been having problems with our code enforcement officer. So I hired a third-party inspector. Now, if he comes and inspects the house that I'm building, that's not permissible?
I guess that the question is that permissible under this proposal?
If this was passed,
That's correct.
Well, under this proposal, it's the code enforcement officer's jurisdiction to be the one to enforce and ensure compliance with the International Residential Code for the town of Lebanon. So if you want to make sure that the town of Lebanon is okay with your house, in order for you to be compliant with this, you'd want the code enforcement officer to look at it and say that if the town votes on this, they're putting that job in the hands of the code enforcement officer. You don't want to you may find yourself in a situation, unlikely maybe, but if this ordinance were to pass and you had a third-party inspector who made a mistake, the code enforcement officer could bring a notice of violation against you because it wasn't signed off on. That's what would happen with the ordinance.
well, actually, a third-party inspector takes more certification than our code enforcement. Because I'm going to tell you what the problem is with me personally.
Okay,
Well, I answered your question about this. If that were to pass, that would be the circumstance. But we don't have, this is not a time for a personal situation, but that's what would happen.
Well, I'm advocating not to pass this because I got a building permit for a house almost 2 years ago. I just got a permit for a garage. Okay? Our code enforcement went and inspected, well, went and looked at the garage because we drive by, which is on a dead-end road, so I don't know why he's down there driving by with one of our selectmen. So he called me, he told me that he could not find my file with my building permits in it or anything else on that house that's been built in more than 2 years. So if this guy don't even know what's going on, how are we gonna stop? That's why I hired a third-party inspector. Because me, something's missing when I went in to get my building permits. His assistant took my file, because my deeds for my property were in there, along with my plot, my maps, my plot plan and stuff. And then all of a sudden it's missing. And yet when I went to the selectmen with this issue, it's sitting on the selectmen's desk at the selectmen's meeting. So,
Okay, so for purposes of discussion here, the third-party inspector is an important element. Okay, but relative to what's happening to your particular situation, not something we're going to be able to resolve here today, okay?
well, what I'm saying is, Richard, if a third-party inspector is not allowed to inspect that house,
Good point.
I don't feel comfortable with our code enforcement inspecting my house.
That's your
If
point.
he can't find my file, I made calls to him for an appointment, which he never answers. So, this here, I think, should not be passed.
There you go. Okay, that's what they call advocacy, okay? Other questions or comments? There's a gentleman in the way in the back.
I just would like the people to stand, because we gotta stand and identify that stuff. I'm Dan Close, and I can just barely hear this woman.
Okay.
If they can stand like the rest of us, it'd be nice.
Okay, all right, great, thank you. So, yes, Ms. Mann.
I am just curious what our attorney might think that if what Chip had brought forward is true. This is just a round and round thing, we really don't need permits.
So, the interaction of what the state determines, what the state has passed, what the town does, for those of you without any background in this is called MUBEC, the Maine Uniform Building and Energy Code. And a few years ago, the state decided that we need to have uniformity of building codes across the state. And for towns that have 4,000 or more residents, they are mandated by the state to adopt this statewide code. So everybody who has 4,000 or more residents in Maine has the same exact building code. Everybody.
That's Lebanon.
And Lebanon is in that category. So you have no choice but to follow the Maine Uniform Building Code. In terms of the specific matter of when are permits required, the state, when they act, there's a board that adopts the MUBEC, and to make it more complicated, the MUBEC itself has like 5 codes that are all part of it, and each code is about this thick, which is why there's classes on it, people go to classes on it. The state wanted the towns to have some home rules, so they decided that they didn't like what the MUBEC said in terms of when people needed permits, and they wanted to make a change, they could make a change. This ordinance just doesn't make a change. It says, we think you need a permit whenever the code tells you you need a permit. So that language that was added that says, or as stated by the municipality, is not a circle. That circle doesn't wind up at a place where you don't need a permit. It winds up at a place that says, you need a permit that the code tells you, that if that International Residential Code or the International Building Code tells you you need a permit. That's the way this is drafted. That language does allow a town to be different than that code in that circumstance in terms of when someone needs a permit. That's.
Additional questions or comments? Yes, ma'am.
I just want to make sure that I'm clear in understanding this new proposed ordinance. My understanding about third-party code enforcement is that, generally speaking, they are of a much higher level of certification than our town code enforcement officer is. There's about almost 30 plus or minus, I believe, in York County. It's common practice for people building homes and building businesses, commercial buildings, to hire a third-party code enforcement officer to oversee their project so that there are no hiccups with the town to make sure they're in compliance, so that the job goes smoothly. So, for one, I would assume that should a person choose of their own choosing and of their own payment to hire a third-party code enforcement officer, it would only save the Lebanon taxpayers money because our town code enforcement officer would not have to answer every silly question that the foreman had. There is a code enforcement officer licensed by the state who's higher level than the town code enforcement officer. So in fact, to say we're going to allow the resident to hire a third-party enforcement officer for a commercial building, but not for a residential building, I certainly don't understand why there would be discrimination between the residential and commercial resident, nor do I understand why we would vote to disallow an individual to hire a third-party code enforcement officer. That's my question. Why would we disallow a person to hire a third-party code enforcement officer for residents or a commercial building?
Thank you. Did anybody answer the question? Other questions or comments on referendum item number 2? Yes, sir, in the back.
I'm Dan Roy. I understand you don't have an ordinance right now for this, correct? Is that correct? You do not currently have an ordinance?
That's correct. There's no ordinance on the books.
Okay, follow-up question. If we vote, so we're not in compliance, so if we vote against this, we're still not in compliance, what would happen?
Good question.
You are required by state law to currently be enforcing this code. So the way it would work right now is because you haven't allowed third-party inspectors, you haven't laid out the lay of the land, it's entirely up to the code enforcement officer to do everything under the code right now.
Other comments or questions on item 2? Yes, ma'am.
We are currently allowed to hire third-party code enforcement officers. At the present time, that is something that is allowed to be done. What this ordinance would do, if it was put in place, would be disallow the resident to get their third-party inspector.
Other
Just wanted to
questions or
clarify.
comments about referendum item number 2? Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I have a question for the town attorney. I'm still looking to find out who wrote this ordinance. Who penned this ordinance? Who gave this ordinance is what I want to know. Who penned this?
I do not know who wrote the original draft. It was sent to me by the board of selectmen. This whole package was sent to me, and I reviewed all the ordinances.
So is there nobody here that's proud of their work that will say, I wrote this ordinance? It seems like a lot of work to me.
Question about who wrote the ordinance? Yet.
I have a question. To Ben Thompson, did you write the ordinance? Did one of your members write the ordinance? Then how could it come from the selectmen board?
It can be proposed by clerk, code enforcement, whoever, then it still has to be run in front of the board of selectmen. We review it just as we did all of it, and approve them and put them on the ballot.
It's not an answer.
Okay. Other questions or comments? Let's cycle around. Well, let's go with you.
What is the originating source of the ordinance? Between the town attorney and the three selectmen, we should be able to get an answer as to.
Okay, wait a minute. Let's go back to the beginning here. There are going to be some questions that there are no answers for. Once you ask the question 3 times and the answer's not forthcoming, asking the question again is not going to get you a different result. Okay, that maybe help you irritate everybody, but that's not going to result in a different
Well, I'm
answer.
not gonna vote for an ordinance
Okay.
that nobody knows where it
Yes,
came
sir.
from.
I find it strange that we ask a simple question, we can't get an answer. Somebody knows the answer, they just don't want to say. They have their reasons, but that's one of the things I've talked about in this town for a long, long time, is all these secrets. And not answering
Okay, so
residents.
we're
I'm
not
talking about this, the answer is not being given.
right.
So this referendum question.
So when you're not getting answers on things, then you're, as a voter, your alternative is to vote against, on May 10th, to vote against.
Can I have my time? This is my first time asking this question. It's not the third time.
Well, the question, what I'm saying to you is once a question has been asked 3 times,
I'm not asking the question, I'm making a statement, I'm advocating.
make a statement.
Thank you.
Okay?
Secondly, I talked about a circular reference, the attorney says it's not circular, it does. I don't know about you, but I kind of believe Richard McCarthy was the guy in charge of the entire state of Maine for code enforcement. Now, he was a great guy, I called him up on a Friday afternoon, he picked up my call. Why whoever did drafted this ordinance couldn't do the same thing and say, hey, can you tell me what's going on and what should I do? Do you have any possible, templates I could take a look at and what's the going rate and why do we have, an ordinance with a fee at $800? The selectmen had no input on that? I don't know. Who's writing these? Again, there's no procedure to do research on these ordinances. They just wing them together and put them out in front of us to vote on. I think that's wrong. I think there ought to be a procedure. I advocate that you vote no to this ordinance.
Additional comments or questions on item number 2? Yes, ma'am.
To the town attorney again. Is Mr. Harlow correct in his statement that a building permit for a 2,000 square foot house, which is pretty average nowadays, would that cost a homeowner an $800 fee for their building permit?
I don't know. I'm gonna do the math.
Well, that's what I'm asking you to do.
What I can point you to is section 8 of the proposed ordinance that has fees.
Okay, thank you very much.
You can take it. No, that's all right.
Sorry.
questions, yes?
Just, and I'm sure the attorney can correct me if I'm wrong,